Chapter 13 discusses the respiratory system, and as you can see that the parts 13.10 and 13.11 are not assigned. So these are the topics that we'll be talking about in this chapter. As you guys know that there is a very close relationship between the respiratory system and the circulatory system. So you'll find that there's a lot of discussion of both of these systems here. The respiratory system, as we said, is very intimately associated with the cardiovascular system since the exchange of gas happens in the lungs, but it's up to the circulatory system to actually deliver these gases through the pulmonary and systemic circulation. Respiration involves the following steps. So there is number 1, pulmonary ventilation, which is the process of breathing, inhalation, and exhalation. And then there's the exchange of gas that happens at the level of the lung, and that's known as external respiration, where the exchange occurs between the air in the alveoli and the blood found in the capillaries of the lung. And then the cardiovascular system will transport again those gases, whether it's in the pulmonary or through the systemic circulation. There is another exchange of gas that happens at the level of the cells, and that's known as internal respiration. And when the cells get oxygen, it uses that oxygen for its own cellular respiration. And in the process of cellular respiration, that's where carbon dioxide is produced and then would have to be delivered back again to the lungs to be exhaled, and so on. The process keeps on going. The functions of the respiratory system: it provides oxygen to the blood and it eliminates the carbon dioxide from the blood. Doing so, it helps in regulating the pH of our body, and it does so in coordination with the kidneys. The respiratory system is also responsible for speech, sounds, or phonation. We will find out that the parts of the respiratory system have cilia and mucus, and that helps in defending against any inhaled microbes, trying to trap them and then pushing them out of the system. It also traps and dissolves any blood clots. So if there are blood clots that are found in systemic veins, for example in the legs, these clots would circulate and end up being lodged into the lungs. If they're small enough, the lungs can get rid of them. It's the bigger ones that could lead to pulmonary embolism, which could potentially be fatal. Now, the organization of the respiratory system. So we've got 2 different parts. There's the upper respiratory tract, and that consists of the nose, the nasal cavity, the nasal sinuses, pharynx, and the larynx. Anything below or beyond the larynx is considered lower respiratory tract, and that includes the trachea, the bronchial tree, and the 2 lungs. So an upper respiratory tract infection would include an infection in any of these sites, while a lower respiratory tract infection would be an infection in any of these areas. Now the airways, and those pretty much start from the nose all the way down until it reaches the alveoli. So you want to be able to follow the path of air. So you can see here that air would go through the nose, nasal cavity, down to the pharynx. Remember, we said that the pharynx is a pathway for both air and food. But for air, the air would definitely go down the larynx, down to the trachea, and then the trachea starts to divide into bronchi. One primary bronchus on the right side and another primary bronchus on the left side. These 2 primary bronchi will then divide into secondary bronchi. And because the right lung has 3 lobes, then there are 3 secondary bronchi on the right, while the left lung has 2 lobes, so we would have 2 secondary bronchi on the left side. And then the secondary bronchi will divide into tertiary bronchi, and the bronchi keep on dividing more and more until we reach the very end of a process where we reach the terminal bronchioles, And then the terminal bronchiole becomes what is known as a respiratory bronchiole that you can see over here. So there's a respiratory bronchiole that takes the air through this alveolar duct and then to the alveoli or into the air. You can see the alveoli is made out of several air sacs. So this part, starting from the respiratory bronchiole, is known as the respiratory zone. Okay, that's where the exchange of gas can actually happen. Everything else that we talked about, starting from the nose all the way until you actually reach the respiratory bronchiole, that's known as the conducting zone. So pretty much they're just tubes in order for the air to pass and reach this respiratory zone down here. And that's what this slide was talking about, that the airways, beyond the larynx can be divided into two parts. The conducting zone, and that again will start from the larynx going down until you reach those terminal bronchioles. The respiratory zone will start from these respiratory bronchioles into the alveolar duct and then the alveolar sac. And that's, again, the area where there's actually exchange of gases happening. And here you can see the relationship between the blood vessels and between the air sacs, between all of these different alveoli. You have these branches of the pulmonary artery coming from the right ventricle. And remember, the pulmonary artery has deoxygenated blood. You can see the whole capillary surrounding the alveoli becoming oxygenated, and then it will leave the lungs as oxygenated blood in these pulmonary veins and return to the left atrium. So what is the function of the conducting zone? If there's no exchange of gas that is happening there? Well, it is a pathway for airflow, and the pathway is of low resistance. There are smooth muscle fibers that are found in these airways, and the smooth muscle fibers are usually relaxed, keeping these airways open, allowing for air to flow into the lungs easily. There are also cilia and lots of mucus glands secreting mucus, and there's also macrophages. And all three of these together work together in order to defend the body and prevent pathogens from entering through air. It also provides for warming and moistening the air coming into before it reaches the air sac. And the conducting zones, especially the larynx, is important for sound production. The ciliary mucus escalator is basically the action of cilia and the mucus glands to trap small particles like small dust particles, pathogens, and so on. And then the cilia, because of the stickiness of the mucus, they'll trap these different things. And then the cilia have these wavy movements, and they keep on pushing all of that upwards towards the larynx and pharynx, and then we end up swallowing all of that. And all of these different particles, especially the pathogens, are going to die due to the action of the hydrochloric acid of the stomach. The thing is that smoking tobacco kills the cilia. And so they still have the mucus glands that are producing, actually they're overproducing mucus because nicotine stimulates these mucus glands and irritates them to produce extra mucus. So now you have a lot of mucus in smokers. The cilia are dead, and that leads to the accumulation of that mucus, which eventually we see that in the form of these chronic coughing that happens to smokers, especially when they wake up in the morning, and that's known as smoker's cough. So smokers would have to cough up all of that mucus that has the fine particles and the pathogens that are trapped that would have usually been brushed up by the cilia under normal circumstances. And this ends the tutorial. I'll see you in the next one.